So I'm gonna tell them what we're talking about first, and then I'll say hi. I'll, say you're a personal friend of mine, and give a little whatever. I'll say hi to you, and then I'll just ask you to say like hi, and then I'm gonna get into your bio, and then we'll get into our conversation. But I want to read your bio before we get into too much conversation. So I'll just do like the brief. Hey, I'm talking to Lashada DiCosmo about the virtual family museum she created. Like I'll do that introduction, and then I'll say hi. So actually, I should probably tell them that I call you Shani because I know I'm going to end up calling you Shani at some point. So I'm
Okay.
going to let them know that too.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's jump in.
I think we're recording already.
Yeah, we're already recording. I'm just trying to move this box on my computer. Okay. Hello, hello. I am Amber Lee Forrester, and welcome to Live to Thrive. Today, we are talking to Lashada DiCosmo about the virtual family museum that she created to honor the history of her family and about the importance of us, especially us of color, telling our stories and owning our narratives. Hello, hello, Lashada DiCosmo. Hey, girl, hey.
Hey, Amber.
Now, guys, I call Lashada Shani, so you're probably going to hear me do that a few times. Shani, Lashada DiCosmo, is a very good friend of mine for over 10, maybe even 15 years now. And I just thought she was so phenomenal in all of what she's doing. And I wanted to bring her on to talk to us today. So let me first just start out by telling you a bit about her. I'm going to read her bio to you, and then we're going to get into some juicy discussion that I think is so timely with everything that's going on now. We had last summer George Floyd, and now we have this summer, and not letting these monumental moments pass us by without really taking the value from them that we can, and really applying this in our lives and thinking, how do we move forward? And what I think that Shani has done in such an amazing way is given us a way to move forward and tell our stories so that other people are not owning our narrative, and this that we are empowering our generations to come. So let's talk about where Shani started in all of this, or Lashada. Lashada's professional experience spans beauty, fashion, consumer packaged goods, and culture. She has 20 plus year proven track record in marketing, sales, strategy, and operational digital transformation for Fortune 500 companies, such as PepsiCo, L'Oreal, Unilever, LVMH, Chanel, Vogue, amongst others. Shani has been a consultant and a corporate executive. In addition to her corporate track, she is passionate about intertwining data-driven storytelling and Black culture. In 2017, she founded One COVE LLC, a consulting firm that specializes in amplifying American multiculturalism via varying degrees of storytelling and fact finding, with a hyper focus on the Black experience and genealogy. Lashada is a creator, a mother, a traveler, grounded, and she is quite spontaneous. She is a graduate of Rutgers University Business School and earned a master's degree from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. Quite an impressive resume, Lashada.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm loving this. All is Black excellence. So let's jump in. Family Museum. Tell us about the Mace Family Museum that you created and what led you to create it.
Yeah. So the Mace Family Museum was born out of the fact that my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Mm.
And I've always had this innate love for my family and our history and our roots in Mississippi. But it was really heightened when I knew that the time would come that my grandmother would not be with us to tell those stories. And so I really wanted to find a way where we could document her line and her family. She's my father's mother. So she's on my paternal side, but I really wanted to find a way where we could encapsulate her story and share that with my children and her great grandchildren, and the rest of our family members. And so with that, we got a group of family members together. I started interviewing my grandmother. It was an exercise for her. So every Sunday we would get on the phone and I would just ask her questions about her life. And it started with her life in Chicago after leaving Mississippi. And then we went back to Mississippi. And my aunts would tell me when she got off the phone, she would be so energized and happy. And she would repeat the stories to them, some of the things that they had never heard before. And so the Mace Family Museum was born out of that. It was born out of a way to encapsulate my family history as a dedication to my grandmother.
I love it. That is amazing. It really makes me think of, as families, as we sit down and we hear our elders, we hear the matriarchs as they tell these stories. But then what happens when the stories aren't told anymore? It's like they could disappear if our children aren't telling the stories like our grandparents were telling the stories. And so what I really honor and admire in what you've done is that you have taken a way to continue, or made a way to continue those stories. Now, what does that, we're going to give some background of what that looks like on the website, but what does the Mace Family Museum include? It's the stories, and tell us what else does it include?
Well, I'll tell you this, we found some very exciting and interesting information just in talking to other family members. So the Mace Family Museum starts with my family in 1815. So I was able, and my grandmother, this is information that, you know, my grandmother didn't know, but once that ball started rolling and I started talking to other family members, verifying and getting pictures for some of the stories that she shared with me, I was given more information. So the Mace Family Museum starts with the first generation that we know of within slavery. She was enslaved, Harriet, my 4 times great grandmother. So it starts, she was born in 1815. So it starts with her. And it ends with my grandmother's father, which is my great grandfather. And it tells their story in a way that shares what was happening in American history at that time. So not only is it about my family, it's also about American history. And so I've used it as a way to educate my children and my cousins about our family while learning a bit of American history as well. So it goes from 1815 to about 1930.
And as African Americans, we often don't know that much about our history. We don't often take the steps to find out ourselves. And then when we don't have that information, and based on what's happened to us as in the history of us being here and what we've gone through in this country, we can't often tell the story in such a complete way like you have. And so I think it's really amazing that you're offering this as a service. And I want to ask you some more questions too, just so that some folks who are listening to us who are thinking, wow, this is amazing, I want to do this for my family, so they can understand what it includes and all of what the end result can be, the final product. So I know that you did some interviewing for some storytelling, but you also did some research into the state archives and some genealogy tests and all of these things. So will you tell us a bit about that and how that helped you to form the complete story as well?
Yeah. So one of the things that we as Black people always joke about is that if you have a keen nose or high cheekbones or straight hair, you got Indian in your family, right?
Right, especially when you're from the Northwest. We got Indian in our family, right? Yes.
Indian in our family. So part of what I wanted to do was make sure that all of the stories I had from my elders was verified with factual documents. And so I went to the one that's noted the most, which is ancestry.com. And I went on ancestry.com and I used the information and the dates that I had from my grandmother specifically, and really started building out the tree with information that I had already known, but supporting documents. And what I found was very intriguing, which was everyone on my family line was listed as mulatto, which made me dig even deeper, which made me want to know, mulatto, what does that mean? It could be Black, it could be mixed, it could be mixed with white, it could be mixed with Native American. And so part of it was looking at the archives that were listed in ancestry.com, but then finding more records in the state archive. So I still have family in Mississippi. And so I partnered with them and they would go to the Mississippi State Archives and look at certain date and pull certain records so that I could verify some of the information that we were given.
And when you
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And so I think one of the questions that you asked me was how can people do this? I think it starts with talking to your family members, talking to your elders, recording their voices, and verifying their information if you have access to ancestry.com or the funds to get a membership. I would really, really support like starting there if you have the time and the funds to do it.
Right. And so, but a part of the service that you do is taking this project on as your own and creating this for a family. Is that right? Through One Cove?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've done it for other clients already who have said, you know what, I'm a mom, I'm a corporate executive. I don't have the passion for it. I want to do it. I don't have time to do the research. Can we hire you for this service? And that's definitely something that we at One Cove do. Is we do the fact finding for you. We help you narrate those stories. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a museum like Mace Family Museum. It's MACE Family, FAMLILY. I think I spelled that right. Museum.com. So if anyone wants to go to that, it's macefamilymuseum.com. But it doesn't necessarily have to be something as large and grand as that. It could very well be just a book that shares your family tree, that shares the historical documents that we've been able to pull. And so there's various ways that we can actually tell our stories as Black people and share our history with our internal family and externally as well. Because there's a lot of things out there that could be enlightening and intriguing and a source of inspiration for others.
This sounds like an amazing gift for a parent or a grandparent. Like I would love to gift my mom something like this. So actually tell me about what your family's response or reaction was once you presented this to them.
Wow. So one of the things that there was a bit of jealousy, right? So I say jealousy in the sense that it's my paternal side and it's my grandmother's line, right? So you have that other parent that's
now
like,
the other side is like, where's mine?
Exactly. And as a person who's passionate about doing this, I could definitely say that I did it for my mom's side of the family as well. But then you have 4 grandparents. So you have 2 grandmothers and 2 grandfathers. And so the project ends up very big. So first response was, well, what about the other side of the family, right? Second response was, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I never knew all of this stuff, right? I never knew that our great uncle was named after Theodore Roosevelt. Never knew that because he hunted with him. Like there's so many things that we were able to find within the research that was inspiring. And it gave a sense of pride outside of the normal enslavement stories, but it gave a sense of pride with everything else that we were able to do. So that was the response. How much more can you do for the rest of the family? And this is amazing, and we're so proud to know it.
I think that response was probably rooted in this desire to know our history, this desire to hear so much more than we were slaves and then we weren't, and then we went through the civil rights, like, you know, to actually hear the stories of our family. For example, your family being from Mississippi and all of the land that you own. Will you tell us a bit about that and just any discoveries around that that you uncovered in this process?
Yeah, one of the things that was very intriguing for me and gave me and my children a sense of pride was that prior to Reconstruction, right, or during Reconstruction, right after the end of slavery, my family was able to purchase over 200 acres of land, right, and this was like 1873, and we know that slavery ended 1865. Some of us didn't know until 1866. So during that time, just 10 years after slavery, my 3 times great grandfather was able to purchase 200 acres of land that are still owned in our family, which for us as Black people, we have these horror stories of how our land was stolen and taken from us. And the fact that I'm able to share with my cousins and my children and the rest of my family that we still own our land and some throughout the family was one of those things that we were super proud of. And we have the original deed. So that part, handwritten and everything, to be able to have that and to share that throughout the family with thousands of family members now, because if you start looking at how families grow, there's so many people that can benefit from this information.
Yeah, you really, when you said the word pride and you described feeling proud, that really resonated with me, because if there's anything that we want to pass down to our generations to come, it's pride and not shame in where we've come from. And so by doing the work that you've done, you're helping families to tell their story and to own their narratives, right? And this is so important. We are right now, we're experiencing a lot of the Black Wall Street and information on Tulsa, Oklahoma coming out. And there's so many people who had no idea that this massive amount of wealth and success was happening in a Black community shortly after slavery. It's like there's a saying that says, if we don't tell our children who they are, someone else will. And I think that that applies in our homes, but it applies as us collectively as a culture, and you're helping us to tell our story, and that is phenomenal. So let's talk a little bit about legacy and what legacy means to you. So I want to ask you to start with, what does legacy mean to you in your family? And then what does legacy mean to you as a whole, as a culture of Black people?
So let me take a pause real quick. There's so many people that we hear about in Black history: Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali. Like, they all have legacy that they've left for the culture. When I think about my family, I think about all of those forgotten stories. And I think about the legacy that lives and breathes within me that at a time I knew nothing about. My forefathers within my family did so much work and endured so much pain so that I can live the way that I live. I am a part of their legacy. And so when I think of my personal legacy, it's, what am I leaving for my children that's better than what they had when they came into this world? I am sharing our story, their story, so that they know exactly who they are and exactly where they come from, so that no one else can tell them, right? And when I think about what that means as Black people and Black culture, our stories go far beyond the Ida B. Wells, far beyond Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the ones, and they are all amazing in their own right, but collectively as Black people, we are so much deeper than just those people. We have so many more stories that have been forgotten or even stolen, that it is now our time to make sure that our legacy is known, heard, and felt. And that's actually how I feel about this movement, this legacy, and the work that we do at One COVE.
Can I get an amen? Woo! All right. So this is phenomenal. Let's talk a bit more about One COVE. And if I am someone who is interested in coming to One COVE and I want to put something together for my family, just tell me, what are some of my options? What are some things that I can come to you for? And you kind of mentioned it before, but I just want to really, really help folks to understand what type of resources you're providing.
Wow. So we've done so many different things at One COVE through the lens and the veins of genealogy. Is, do you know who your father is? Do you know who your mother is? Do you know where you come from at the basic level of maternal and paternal? What does my DNA say, right? So we've helped people find their biological parents and tell those stories. So it can start there. And the folks that I'm speaking of were adopted, so they didn't really know who was who, or they never knew their father. Those types of situations. The other work that we do is, I don't know anything past my grandparents. So can you help me find out who my great grandparents were and where they came from? So we build family trees, and where we start is where however deep you want to go is how deep we can go. And so the work that we've been able to do, we found slave masters and their records, and found family members listed in those records, such as in wills or in family books for the folks that had enslaved their ancestors. So that's another route that we can go, through your maternal, paternal, or both sides. It gets kind of expensive when you look at the complete family tree, because it's a lot of digging and a lot of work. And without getting into the weeds of it all, that's pretty much what we do. We can build out a family tree, and have a family book. We can do a family museum. We can write the family story, or we can just find your parents if that's all you want to know, or your siblings.
Yeah, I'm thinking like when family reunions resume this year, that this is also a great something to break out at a family reunion, right? Like, how about not just doing the hustle, having a good time and throwing on the barbecue, but really sitting down and hearing some of the stories of the elders and of the history of a family. That's
Yeah.
really, really amazing.
We've been doing that on my mom's side of the family for a few years now. I'd probably say about 6 years. We've been just telling stories and documenting them, and me coming in and sharing it so much that I've become the family historian. To whereas if people want to know something, even the elders at this point, they call me and say, "Can you tell me how we're related to so and so?" And I'm able to do those things.
Imagine you at like 80. If this is you now, oh my gosh, wow. So let's talk about the kids for a bit. What does this mean to your kids? And what do you think this means for children in the younger generations?
So for children in the younger generations, they'll have so much more than what we had. Like I personally feel like our generation, our grandparents were coming up, at least for me personally, my grandparents were coming from the Mississippi, right? They were coming during a time where there was a lot of segregation and then the civil rights movement. And so everything that they experienced in the South, they did not want to talk about it. It was too painful. And so there's a lot of information that I may have missed out on growing up that would have given me a little more pride, less pain, because I didn't have to endure what they endured. And so for my children, all they hear is the triumph. We can share the tragedy, but they experience and live and breathe the triumph that we as a people can overcome anything. And so that's the story, and that's what I stick to when I talk about our family history. It's, if you look on the wall behind me, that's all of my ancestors that I have pictures of, and it starts from 1915 and ends with 1930. So when my children come into my office, they look on that wall and they know exactly who they belong to.
That's so powerful. It's so powerful, you know, because I will say, when I remember being in high school and I went to a predominantly white high school. Well, it wasn't predominantly white. There just weren't many Black people. There was a lot of Indians, a lot of Asians and Jewish people there. And they could go back and they could say, oh, and my great grandfather was a tradesman or was a furrier or was a silversmith or was, and they could go back for so far and say what their great greats and their great great greats were. And I never really felt like I could share in that experience. I was always fascinated to hear it from them, but I didn't, one, I didn't feel the pride in going all the way back. Like, what am I going to say, you know? But I think a part of that was an assumption of what more is there to say. However, we have so many rich stories and they just are so monolithic to everyone else until we start to dig in, and then we start to see that there's so much more than what the history books tell us about ourselves, our families, our landowners, our business owners, our politicians, our artists, our creators. And you know, I think when I think of a big picture of what could come of One Cove and what you're doing within genealogy and helping to tell the Black experience and stories, I think of some alternative history books being composed. You know, it's like once more and more and more of us learn our stories, there's so much more to be told, to share even outside of our families, that paints a much broader picture than what we've learned for so many years. I mean, think of our history books and like, what was Black history in history books? It always started with, well, you were in Egypt, but that was a long time ago. Then you came here and then you were slaves and then you couldn't do what you wanted to do for so long. And now here you are, George Floyd. Right. And it's like, okay, if we keep telling ourselves these same truncated versions of our stories and leaving out the triumphs, as you mentioned, and just focusing on the tragedies, then where does that send us as a people? Where does that take us? What vision does it give us for our future? But when we recognize the greatness that lies within our genes, we can really tap into that and go, you know, I come from kings and queens, and not just 10,000 years ago, but like really, like you had some queens of Mississippi and kings of Mississippi in your family just less than a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay, Shani, I'm really just honoring you for all the work that you're doing. And I wanna get into telling folks how they can find you and everything. But before that, I actually want to mention another story that you've told and just shine a little bit of light on little Nellie Nimble. So will you tell us about little Nellie Nimble and your storybook that you and your father have created?
I wish I had it next to me so that I could hold it up.
That's okay.
Um,
We'll impose a picture of it in the film.
so little Nellie Nimble, talk about legacy, Amber. Like my father wrote Little Nellie Nimble, a series of 5 books over 20 years ago. And he wrote them specifically for his grandchildren. He wrote them as life lessons that he wanted to share with them. And they were just that. And then COVID hit. And my dad was like, you know what? There's a lot going on. And I feel like not only do I want to share this with my grandchildren, but I feel like these stories are worth hearing, other children hearing them, right? And the first book of Little Nellie Nimble is Getting Acquainted. And it's about diversity. Mind you, my father wrote this book over 20 years ago. And so the book is about, and this is, we're dealing with, not only are we dealing with the COVID pandemic, we're dealing with a lot of racial and social injustice, right, against Black people and people of color. And so I'm just gonna say that when my dad asked me to help him publish this book, it was really about teaching children that everything that we're seeing on TV, right, with George Floyd and the protests and systemic oppression and all of that stuff, at the very core, all of us are different in some way, right? All of us are different, and yet we're the same. And so the book, Getting Acquainted, Little Nellie Nimble, is about just that, about how we're different but the same. We all bleed red, you know? And so, yeah, Little Nellie Nimble, Getting Acquainted was the first book. And now the book that we're about to launch in the next upcoming weeks is Being Cautious. And it's about how the police are there to protect our children. They're there to protect our communities. And it talks about how to respect our communities and respect those in blue. And those in blue will do their jobs. Because we have a lot of divide within our country right now. And the kids are hearing it. They're seeing it on television. They're hearing the elders speak. They're hearing their parents speak. We got a lot of polarizing conversations that are happening right now. Little Nellie Nimble is about balancing that for the youngsters that are still trying to understand what's happening in this world.
And getting acquainted. I think this is really a time for us to get reacquainted and to redefine what our norms are. And so I love the way that you are taking this message and bringing it down to the level that a child can understand. And I can imagine that the parents are going to learn something too and possibly have some aha moments when reading this book. So for those of you all who want to check out Little Nellie Nimble, Shani, please tell them where they can find the book.
The book is available on Amazon, but we would prefer that you go to littlenellienimble.com, Nellie with an I-E. So little, Nellie, nimble, NIMBLE.com, littlenellienimble.com.
And I can't wait for part 2 to come out. So keep on checking that website. Get the first one, and then you got to come back and get the next one too, because these conversations are so very important. All right. So Shani, also, before we go, please tell everyone where they can find your services for One Cove and contact you about any family tree or genealogy or even possible virtual museums that they would like built for their family.
Absolutely. So it's just that, it's the number 1, COVE, COVE.com. One Cove, which means one community, one love. So it's onecove.com.
I love it. One community, one love, and you are doing your work and establishing your impact in this community, and it's so very important. So thank you so much for all that you do. I am going to be contacting you about my family museum because we got to figure some stuff out over here. I can only go back probably to my great great grandmother, but I know that there's more beyond that. And yeah, it's I know it's something that everyone, I guess, could possibly do on their own. But when you have someone like you on the case that's like, I'm going to dig deeper, I'm going to ask the questions, you know, they're not going to avoid Lashada coming for them. They might be like, Amber, I'll call you back. But when Lashada calls and she's on the case, I know you pulled all that information together. So folks, check out macefamilymuseum.com. It is really phenomenal what Lashada or Shani has pulled together. And I hope that you will consider her to tell your stories as well. And check out ancestry.com as well. You know, these tools exist, and this is an opportunity for us to use them and not just accept the lack of knowledge that we've had in the past, to get reacquainted with what our history is and what our possibilities are, and understanding that and moving forward. This is not just about our past, but it's about our future, and it's about telling these stories to our children. So I hope that you will consider, and I'm so glad and thankful that you all were listening today. So check out quartzwellnesscollective.com for more interviews from Live to Thrive, including this one with Lashada DiCosmo. Shani, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. All right, my love. Bye.
Bye.